Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Natasha Junejo. I'm literary lead at South Asian Heritage Month and founder of South Asian Writers. And I'm joined today by Sathnam Sanghera and Sacha Dhawan for our session about the boy with the top knot. Now, Sathnam is the author of Empireland and Marriage Material and The Boy with the Top Knot, and a journalist with the Times as well, and he's absolutely amazing. And Sacha's incredible. Sacha is an actor who's been in the Marvel's Iron Fist. He was playing Sacha in The Boy with the Top Knot, and he was the Master in Doctor Who. All of my nerdy friends have many, many questions for you and want spoilers, but I promise I will not ask. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for having us.
Very good, thanks. Yeah, I've just back from the Commonwealth Games without watching any sport. I just watched Duran Duran and came back.
Well, that's a good reason to go, I think. That's a really good reason to go. So I'm going to start us off with a nice, easy one. In terms of this memoir that you wrote when you were 30, it's beautiful, by the way. Why was it important to tell this story?
It is a bit weird talking about it because actually it's weird seeing Sacha because we've not talked for about 5 years about this. And I wrote the book when I was probably, yeah, you're right, 31, 32. I'm 45 now. And the drama was made 5 years ago. So the thing is, each time you talk about it, you are more further away from the neurotic person in the book. I've got all sorts of problems now, but they're not the same problems as they were in the book. But yeah, I mean, it feels like talking about someone else. But yeah, as a young man, my main issue in my 20s was trying to avoid getting married to someone of my parents' choosing, and also trying to make sense of my dad and my sister's severe mental illness. So I guess those two things became more and more difficult to avoid, those two issues. And eventually I gave up my job to write a book, amazingly. And it worked out largely.
Yes, yeah. It was brilliant. It was a good punt, yeah. I think. So how did you both first meet? Was it after Sacha was brought on to play you? Was it prior? Did you have a hand in casting him? How did that process look?
God, no. Jesus, I had no influence whatsoever. I had a couple of actors approach me who thought I had influence, and they kind of lobbied for the role. I got the sense that there aren't many roles like this available in mainstream TV. So I met Sacha once he'd been cast. And I actually, this is a terrible thing to confess to, but I've not watched a single episode of Doctor Who in my life. I'm saving it for when I retire, and then I'm going to watch all of them.
Excuse me.
Sacha, leave.
No, it's so good because we've not seen each other for ages. And actually, it's been 5 years, right, since we made it. And I've had a lot of time to reflect on it. And you're right, lots of things have changed. But we met after after I'd been cast, and I was so excited to meet Sathnam. Not because I wasn't necessarily nervous because I was playing him, because I just read his amazing memoir and had so many questions to ask. And it was so nice because it's the first time I'd read something that really captured the British Indian experience. It was, Sathnam's story, it was specific to him, but yet there was so much that I could relate to. And with the book being so specific, not just culturally, it felt incredibly universal as well, just about growing up. So did we meet at the work, right? At the Times?
Oh God, you came to the Times, didn't you? But I also remember meeting you in Birmingham.
We did a little kind of, we met the family in Wolverhampton a bit later, right?
I think I met you and they were storyboarding the drama, and I just by like an hour or so I'd missed the audition of the young kid. Apparently there were like 50 young kids with top knots. So I'm glad I missed that, because I think I would have cried. All these little cute kids, you know what I mean? Did you see any of that?
I didn't get to see that, no. I do remember our conversation though at the Times. It was really nice. And then at the end of the conversation, we took this selfie. It's an amazing view from the office. Yeah. And you were showing me where you worked and everything. And it was actually really nice because you kind of gave me the blessing to not try and necessarily just imitate you. you really respected it was almost my story as well, and to own it. And I've kind of, that's the blessing I needed to kind of get on with it. And we had such a great conversation about things.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't realize you were doing research. You know what I mean? I guess actors are always doing research. And I remember meeting you on set and saying, "Oh, I like your clothes." And you were like, "I wouldn't wear these clothes normally. They're literally your clothes. I would normally wear Doc Martens." And ever since I've been thinking I should buy a pair of Doc Martens. I still haven't got a pair.
So I was dressing as you and you want to dress as me.
Basically, well, you seem to do all right, you know. So yes.
You know, during that conversation, there was something that has still stuck with me to this day. And I asked you, you know, did Sathnam know about his sister and his dad's mental health? And you answered it in a way that was really interesting, because you said, I knew and I didn't know. And it's something that stuck with me, because as an actor, you know, we come asking all our questions and we want definitive answers. We want to know how, why. And I've always carried this, because I'm always looking to get a clear-cut answer on something. But you taught me kind of like, you don't need to have, you can have a bit of both, like you knew and you didn't know. And I've always embraced that as an actor going forward, and it's always made my performances so much more interesting and complex. And I say that, this idea of you can know and you don't know, or you can have a bit of both, if that makes sense. Because from my British Asian experience, I've spent the last couple of years, especially since Topknot, trying to carve out for myself the British Indian identity, and sometimes put so much pressure on myself to do that. I felt a certain kind of responsibility, and I found that all my choices revolve around that. And I felt slightly repressed doing that.
That's
and I've realized it's a lot of pressure. And I've realized that I felt kind of repressed doing that. And actually what I've learned is there's something brilliant about the British Indian experience, is you can have the best of both. And so with my choices going forward, sometimes I'll go, actually, this really needs to be culturally specific. And sometimes I'll go, actually, no, I don't need it to be culturally specific. I just want to be an artist. I don't want to be necessarily defined from the background that I come from. So it all came from just what you were saying about, you don't have to have a definitive choice. Does that make, there's a lot.
No, that makes sense. Actually, it's weird because we did some promo together, and I remember hearing you talk about acting and your career, and I could relate to it. Basically, it's the same thing. It's like, I want to be respected as a writer, full stop. I want to sell books to a big audience, a broad audience as possible. I want to carry on being a journalist in the Times, but equally the ethnicity and the South Asianness of it matters. But it it matters to different degrees with different projects. And sometimes it's not there at all.
How do you both cope with that? Because that is such when you're engaging in public life to whatever degree that you are, that is such a heavy burden to carry, because you then become an ambassador of your race, of your religion, of your culture, of your gender, that every intersectional identity that you have, you almost unwittingly become an ambassador of those things. And like you were saying before, Sacha, like that, it affects every decision that you make and every part that you would take. What does that look for you now? What does that look like for you now? And how do you both self-describe? Do you call yourself British Asian? Do you call yourself Punjabi? Do you call yourself South Asian? And has that changed over time?
I think with regards to my Indian heritage, I think because of all of that, I avoided it for so long. I didn't quite understand it, because my parents' sense of Indian identity is very different to mine. And then I thought, well, should I just ride on my parents' coattails? But that didn't seem truthful to me. And then being just British, that didn't seem comfortable to me. There was this space in between that just felt confused to me. So when Boy With The Topknot came along, in all honesty, I turned down the audition, because I'm so used to playing characters but yet this suddenly felt so truthful to me and so personal to me. I thought, I'm not ready to explore all of that. But actually, I'm so glad I did, because it got me to really start asking questions and carving out my own sense of identity. And like I was saying before, I think I may have gone too far the other way and suddenly thought, hey, I want to be the spokesperson. I want to try and carve out that space. I want to try and represent my community, create all these opportunities. It became so stressful. So now, as Sathnam was saying, I take a bit of both. It depends on the project that comes along, and then I make the choice. But in a way, because of Boy With The Topknot, I'm not afraid anymore to articulate what I want to do with that character in terms of going, this needs to be culturally specific. But then sometimes I'm like, it doesn't need to be. So that's still evolving for me. But only recently I've learned to just kind of take the pressure off myself. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm an artist, and I want to retain that. I want to play a wealth of different characters. But it's usually with projects, when it came to being culturally specific, I wouldn't have that conversation, and therefore the character was Indian but became really general. But now I've got the confidence to be like, no, it needs to be exactly like this. And like Sathnam's story, when it's so specific, it actually becomes much more universal. And I think sometimes producers neglect that a little bit. They like everything to be general. So I'm still investigating and finding stuff. It might change, but that's where I am at the moment.
I think allowing ourselves the room for it to change is the important thing. I think that we, up until recently, there's been two very specific sides of the coin of what South Asian and minority identity can be. And I think now we're just pushing it, like creating space for intersectionality and multidimensionality. And like you're both saying, that doesn't have to be one thing always. The commitment to one thing is not finite. It's not a definite thing. You don't stamp that onto your chest and that's not your identity. We are allowed to breathe and grow and change and just as everybody else is. Sathnam, how does that feel to hear that you've had this kind of profound impact on somebody's career and identity as a South Asian man?
Oh, I don't think I've had that much of an influence on Sacha.
I think you have.
Well, I see his interviews because I get Google alerts. So it's becoming really less and less important, his work with Topknot. But I mean, in terms of all of that, I had a lot of grief when the book came out, 2008, from the Sikh community. Because basically, I don't think there were any other Sikh memoirs at the time. Now there's quite a few. And so I had loads of people saying, why are you talking about the Sikh community like this? My family's not like this. I'm not. They basically interpreted the book as a statement on the whole community. And my point was, it's not your experience, it's my experience. You know, that's it. But when you're the first in a community, you are representative. But it's only with time. Every community goes through this. I think Muslim community went through it. Jewish community went through it much, much earlier than the rest of us, you know, because there's a real tradition of writing books. Whereas Sikh Punjabi culture is not fantastically literary. I mean, there's some great literature, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's a literary culture. It's quite, especially the Jat culture, it's very working class. And so to write about things and to dwell on your problems, it was not normal. But it was great to, I mean, it got very fractious. I mean, I had death threats and a bodyguard.
Something new for you. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. For
every book.
Reasons. But it calmed down. And by the time Sacha got involved and this was being done, every possible weird thing that could have happened had already happened. And so I just couldn't see how it could be any weirder. And in all truth, it wasn't. I was expecting things to go really crazy, but they didn't. It was actually really nice. It was almost, I'd say it was 95% nice.
But you know, 5 years on, and reflecting on it, what are your thoughts on our adaptation now?
I've been thinking about it because, you know, my girlfriend hasn't watched it yet. And then I keep on thinking, should she watch it? You know, should she to understand me? And I think it was a really rare experience in that almost every writer I know who has an adaptation, it goes wrong or it's difficult in some way. And this was really not difficult at all. And even in the ways it changed the book, it was amazing because it changed the books in ways that reflected my life, the way my life had changed. You know, in that around the time it was made, my parents had met my then girlfriend for the first time. Around the time it came out, so it was just really fortunate. The whole thing was kind of lovely. And the other lovely thing about it is TV. It's not like film; it disappears to a degree. You know, people don't watch it all the time, and that's nice because then you're not stuck in this endless bubble of people thinking that's your life.
Mhm. I remember doing the table read,
Oh, that was
and
mental.
I think that was a really nerve-wracking experience because you obviously I just discussed it with Sathnam and the director, but a lot of the work you do at home here, and then you suddenly in a table read and you're kind of doing it. You want to kind of commit to it because how often do you get to see a lead British South Asian role? There weren't many 5 years ago. There's more now, and there could be more. But at that time, I'm like, I really want to go for it. But it's really exposing. Because sitting in front of me is Satnam, but also it's exposing in a sense that I put a lot of myself in that role. And it was nerve-wracking. I'm not sure how you found it, Satnam. I know.
Yeah, it's weird to walk in a room and see about 12 actors representing your family and acting out the worst things that have ever happened to you. I actually walked out of the read. I couldn't handle it. It did my head in. I'm going to cry.
I was going to ask you about that, like what it was like to have your life shared so publicly.
I think that was my attitude in general, in that I found it emotionally overwhelming, which is part of the reason I left you guys alone, because I didn't have the desire to live every minute of the production because it was so painful, some of the stuff. I kind of dealt with it, drew a lot. When you write a book, in a way, it's a way of dealing with your problems and drawing a line and moving on. As soon as it's published, you're not interested in it anymore. I was interested. I just didn't want to relive all the pain. And so I was quite happy to give the pain to you guys to deal with it.
It was great. You did give us a lot of, you don't know how the writer of the memoir is going to be, but you did from the very beginning. You gave us complete ownership of it. It didn't feel like we were just adapting your story. You get to own it in our own way. And Lindsay Miller, the director, was really great.
She was amazing, wasn't she?
Yeah, she didn't just come on as a director. Okay, I'm just going to direct this. She really came on board early on and really got under the skin of it all. So by the time he came to shoot, it was because we only had 3 weeks. To shoot it, which is, it's frustrating, isn't it? You finally get the chance to make, such an important British South Asian story, and it's like we're not going to give you the, the full 6 weeks or 5 weeks. We're going to condense it to 3, and that was difficult. So
it's mad. I forgot that. When I spent 2 months making a 2-part documentary, which had a fraction of the budget. It's mad that how quickly it was done. But
yeah, it was crazy. But because of Lindsay and Nisha Party, our producer, the script was in a great place. We'd done a lot of the chat, as it were, and the conversations, and it was about just getting on with it. So in a way, even though it was 3 weeks, it meant that we couldn't sit there and just think about it. You just had to go for it, because that's sometimes you have months to film something.
How is the level of intensity over that 3 weeks? Because the subject matter, what you're presenting on screen it's incredibly intense. It was incredibly loaded as well. How is that packed into 3 weeks? Yeah,
it was intense because, ideally you'd want to spend more time with Anupam and Dipti Naval, who were playing my mum and dad, and I didn't get along with them. And then suddenly, you've got to do scenes where you're acting as if you've known each other, for 30 years. And but it was just great. It just worked. And yeah, some of the scenes, particularly with the mum and dad, they were intense, but they were such a joy to play. I've never really had the opportunity to get my teeth into something like this. That wasn't just a story. That I keep saying this. It was my story as well. And I do remember doing a scene with Dipti, and it was asking my Dipti was telling me about her character, Satnam's mum in it was telling me about what happened in the past. And I remember after a take, I've never done this before, I just went to the toilet, shut the door, and I cried. It was like the two stories had kind of collided for me in that moment, because we don't talk a lot in our community about the past. And I'm trying to be much more active in doing that. I feel like by understanding my parents' story, I'm able to build my own a little bit. So I think especially in lockdown, and still am today, is very proactive in getting my parents to talk about stuff, not just like, the challenges, but just life itself. Like, how did you get here? How did, and it really shapes me going forward.
We don't talk about this stuff. I think there is a culture of silence in our community, and I think that spans back generations. And I think a lot of it is intergenerational trauma as well. I think there's a great deal there's a legacy of silence here, and work like this, books like this, and films like this are so important, because for me, in the watching of it, it was like a fulcrum point, retroactively, but still a fulcrum point, whereby I just thought, nobody talks about this. And I can't imagine how many people and their aunties were all aunties, we're all just so baffled by the fact that this is so plainly presented in front of you, and it's so vulnerable and raw and very beautiful as well in the honesty of it. And we don't that visceral vulnerability right on the surface is not something that you find in our community. We're not encouraged to talk about these things. People aren't encouraged to go to counselling when they have issues. Everything is very folded away and neatly packed away. So
there's a culture in Asian communities of putting your best foot forward, and
indeed,
it's reflected in the fact that I think I read somewhere that in India, and actually in the West, Indian families spend a third of their wealth on weddings. It's about displaying to everyone how successful your family is, and the idea of parading your problems. Even my own family didn't understand the concept. It's like, why do you want to talk about this stuff? Weirdly, my mother understood it, because for her, she'd had to live with it as a secret for such a long time, and she found it very therapeutic, and so did my sister. But in general, the community, they don't talk about stuff like this.
So when you wrote the memoir, did you give it to the family to read before it went into, before it was published?
Yeah, that's the thing. I didn't want to do anything without their approval, so gave it to my sister and my brother, who we always joke he's already ever read 2 books in his life. One of them was Moonwalker by Michael Jackson, and the other one was my family memoir. And he said I'd been too nice to him, which is true. I'd been too nice to him. My sister asked me to delete like quite a fundamental episode, and I found it painful because I spent so much time writing it. But I'm so glad she did, because it means that we've got secrets still. Like, not the whole story's out there. And my mom knew everything that was in it, because I'd spent so long going over it. So yeah, everyone in the family had basically read it and approved it. And I wouldn't have done it without that, because it would have been too stressful and exploitative, probably. But if you read the book, you'll notice I'm nice about everyone except myself, basically. That's a good strategy if you ever want to write a memoir. Be nice about everyone.
And
I'm so sorry, Sasha, go ahead.
No, sorry. Now about this, because it's brought back so much stuff.
Do it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when when the adaptation was happening and it was being made as a TV drama, did that bring up a lot of stuff again, or was it for the family, or was like, no, it's fine because we've had the memoir, that's we kind of know what to expect? So was it did it bring a whole new set of?
It was mostly either good or weird. My mum, she watches the Sikh channel a lot, and they had a phone in about the drama. And I had to physically stop her from ringing in. She was like, they're idiots, they don't know what they're talking about. They're saying that you should just eat some fruit and then your mental illness is going to be fine. But it was in a way, she was really heartened that it was being discussed. But the level of discussion was so lame. But I think she really enjoyed it. Basically, my mom comes across very well, and in that case, I haven't been kind to her. She is basically Nelson Mandela. So people just basically stop her in the street now and say she's an amazing woman, which is a great gift to give to your parents, isn't it?
Yeah,
it makes me. And people stop my dad as well. And you got to remember, people with schizophrenia, in generally, you cross the road to avoid people with these symptoms. I do. It can be quite a scary illness. But to have people like old white ladies approach my mum and my dad in the bus and say, we saw you on TV in your story and it's amazing. That's a really great thing, isn't it?
It's a lovely thing. So the Punjabi language is threaded really, really beautifully throughout the book and the film.
I can't remember whether Sasha speaks Punjabi. You don't, do you?
No, you had to learn it for the film, didn't you? That's my next question, Sathnam. Stop. No, I'm just, how important was it for you to include it? And then also, Sasha, learning it as well. Do you still speak Punjabi now? Or have you forgotten it all?
Well, yeah. No, I speak a little bit, or I pretend that I do until my aunties clock on that they go, he's just nodding his head here. And I've called him an idiot several times and he's still nodding his head. I think that particularly was something that I was really nervous about. And I am still quite embarrassed about not knowing the language.
Same.
And it's weird because I take it on as like it's my own fault, but I just wasn't taught it. So it was quite nerve-wracking learning it for that particular scene. But it was good as well. It was like I was confronting something in terms of I don't have to be embarrassed about it. It's the way that it is, and I guess I'm learning to carve out my own sense of identity. I'm not there to represent everybody. I kind of represent myself within the community, and if I don't know the language, that's part of it.
Well,
I think there's a lot of unnecessary shaming about language, and I learned a lot actually from my own nervousness about the Punjabi in the script, because I'm always self-conscious that my Punjabi is not very good, because people often tell me it's not very good. Also, I've spoken Punjabi on TV and been trolled to death. And I think what I realized is that my Punjabi comes from my mother, because that's the way it goes in immigrant families, right? All of my Punjabi comes from my mum and my dad. And they speak a particular kind of Punjabi from 1950s India, which is out of date and considered, a bit awkward. So I'm totally at the mercy of. So why am I embarrassed about speaking this Punjabi? Because I haven't got any other references. I had a similar thing when I drank some lassi on TV for one of my documentaries, and I admitted I'd never had a lassi before. And there were loads of people online going, "Oh, what a coconut! Satnam's not had a lassi before." And I went back to my mum. I said, "Why have I never had a lassi?" And she said, "Oh, I don't like lassis, so I never gave you one." And it shows you how in Britain, if you're Asian, you're at the mercy of the weirdness of your own family, and then you get judged for it.
So true.
I hate the phrase coconut. It's my least favorite.
I do too.
It's racist.
And Bounty Bar as well. What's that about?
Yeah.
It's racist. It's racism, isn't it? It's like.
And why are we always food?
We have to accept that as we integrate as a community and we become more successful, we're allowed to have different opinions. We're allowed to have different personalities.
Yeah, I think because of that, a lot. I mean, I was, in a very white school. There are only like a handful of South Asians in the school, but I think because of that almost embarrassment or shame, that's why for so many years I avoided really delving into my Indian culture. I kind of moved far away from it, and I think as a result of that, I lost a sense of myself.
Did you act at school?
I did actually, but I didn't question my identity at all. It was only as I got older and I just felt like.
What did you play at school?
Oh God, in school, God,
yeah.
I think I was doing like Oliver Twist or something.
So colorblind casting.
Colorblind casting. I didn't think any different of it, but in a sense, the reason why it all started to come to surface was I felt like I was coming into jobs or coming into rooms with my being way too grateful. do you know what I mean? It's like I'd won a competition in some way. And I feel like my parents had kind of ingrained this kind of don't talk about being different, just play by their rules in a way. Just be grateful for the opportunity. Don't talk about race, culture, just do what they ask you to do it. And that made me, over time, start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially when I was on jobs. And it's changed a bit now, but I wouldn't really see people like me. There'd be a handful of who'd been cast to fill in certain roles of the diversity quota. So I wasn't encouraged to talk about it. After a while, it started to, in all honesty, piss me off.
Mm.
And I'd keep saying to myself, why am I so darn polite all the time?
I think that was the attitude of our parents' generation, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Keep your head down.
Keep your head down, get along, keep it quiet, don't make a fuss.
But now with our generation,
that's for safety. It's for safety, the safety of the children. And now we have the luxury of being able to figure out who we are.
Yeah, and the next generation are even less
more
respectful.
So. Yeah.
Annoying little gits.
It was great for projects. It was rare to have projects like Boy With The Topknot that brought us all together a little bit, because we just wouldn't do that. And we were touching on it before, but I was ingrained with this mentality, especially in the acting business, that people of British South Asian identity were my competitors. Like, we just wouldn't talk to each other. There was almost a strange rivalry. And I realized that it's a great opportunity to, rather than being grateful to have a place on the table, stick together, communicate, and build your own tables, build your own work. And that's what I'm doing now. And it's not solely based on trying to just carve out the British Asian space. It's about making good quality work and not letting, in all honesty, white people make the decisions of what our culture is and the stories we should be telling. And it's still rare to see leading British Asian characters on screen, and certainly in theatre, unless it's the same kind of narrative. And that's really got to change.
Yeah, no, something quite bleak. I was thinking about talking to you, and I was thinking, I remember at the time, a lot of people said, why is it taking so long for this to be made? Because basically there was Buddha Suburbia, goodness gracious me, and then a long gap before Topknot came along. And the depressing thing is, there's not been anything since Topknot in this area. I feel like there's been a couple of feature films made, but not on British TV. And you know what? I've stopped caring, so I'm just going to tell you the truth of what happened. In that, Topknot was never going to be made. It was actually my next book, Marriage Material, which had been optioned by the BBC. That was going to get made into a multi-part drama, but then Topknot got made, did really well, attracted a completely different audience to what the BBC normally does. I remember walking into the BBC and there was a display of all the stats of how the audience was different, and it was a wild success. And then they never made my other drama. And the reason that they gave me was, we've got Riz Ahmed, who's making something very similar, and we've just optioned him, which is fine. I interviewed Riz Ahmed a year or so ago. I said, how's your family drama going? And he said, that's not being made. So this is what happens in the media. They trade us off each other.
It's one at a time.
And basically one at a time, one every 10 years.
But this is the issue. It's the chocolate monolith. It's like seeing us all as one homogenous block of brown people. And because we've not been humanized in that view as people that have an intersectional experience where you can find commonality, whatever race, gender, other intersectionality you are as well. And so when they look at us, they go, I don't know how to sell brown books, and I don't know how to sell brown stories. So we've got this amount of room for a brown story, and everybody vie for that opportunity. And unless we break that system, I don't think anything is going to change. And so, Sacha, I'm really interested to hear about what you're doing.
Yeah,
well, this is the thing. We're not. It's not equality. You're fighting
a box ticking thing, basically.
Yeah, essentially. It's like when you think about Dragon's Den, when people are looking for an investment in their company, they always want to retain the majority share. In all these scenarios recently where we've been looking at equality, and we've been looking at making boardrooms more representational and all of this stuff, it's such a con because the majority share is still being retained by the people that want to keep it the way that it is. And I love this thing that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said before she passed away. And they said, when will you stop fighting for equal rights with the Supreme Court justices? And she said, when all of them are women. When all of them are women, that's when we need to stop fighting. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh God, it's a con. It's a con. We're fighting for 49% and the controlling majority is never going to change. And I was like, that tiny lady, she knows everything. And that's exactly what it is. So I think you're exactly right, Sacha. It's, first of all, equality is not a finite resource, first of all. And the people that are afraid that it is are the people that are hindering this process. And second of all, it's not about making room on the table and making space on the table and having to share the food. Break down the walls. Let's get out of the room. Let's build 5 more tables. You know, it's not about giving the steering wheel over in the car to somebody else and losing control. Get out of the car, get in a spaceship, let's go into space. And then the options are limitless. You're not losing anything. You're gaining infinite possibility. And because people don't see us in that intersectional way, and they only see us as this one homogenous block, the opportunity and possibility is not visible, and that makes me so sad, because everybody loses in that scenario. But yes, I know that you're a writer and a producer as well, and you've alluded to work that you're doing that's along this line and that has this sort of worldview in mind. Can you expand on it at all and tell us anything?
Yeah, and so I think one of the things I realized is that
I'm losing you a bit.
Oh, am I back?
I know, got you back.
You're back.
I'm back. I'm back. I felt like sometimes the industry can feel a little segregated. You know, it's like us and them slightly, and it fuels a certain kind of anger. And actually, we're missing an opportunity. And I want for myself, and I can be like this. Like, oh, they just don't get it. They're not, they're not going to make up the work that we want to do. And actually, what I've realized about re-educating slightly, and also learning to trust my own voice, and that has value, it has currency, and not being ashamed of certain things, and realizing that I'm not just I'm not just about my identity. I've got so much more to offer. So I'm just keen on sometimes making stories that can be culturally specific, or on the flip side, making a complete sci-fi that happens to have South Asian characters in it, because we don't see enough genre-based films or theatre pieces that can be genre. A lot of it is always linked to our history or our identity, which is fine, but I'm trying to move on from that and just show that we can tell good stories and we can be entertaining. And sometimes I feel we're not quite there. And I've been fortunate enough to play some great parts, like, The Master, but the majority of the time, when there is this kind of a big scale project, I feel like I see the South Asian characters in it are just not given the meat that they deserve and the range that they can actually show. So a lot of the projects that I'm focusing on are about that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. And yeah, that's what I was going to say. During lockdown, and maybe I was a little naive here, because I was like, we've just got to get people together and talk. And I approached a few fellow artists, and my goal was like, we're just going to make loads of great work. Right, what do we want to make? And actually, I realized there was a lot more work to do, because we hadn't really spoken to each other a lot. In terms of, we see each other at press nights and events, but we hadn't literally got in a room and gone, right, how's everyone feeling? What's the deal? It wasn't just about making good work. It was about sharing our experience. And I think I was naive to think that we can just pick up a pen and paper and start making one of the best film scripts. And actually something more empowering and exciting happened. We just started sharing stories, and I gave up control a little bit to see where that would go. And it was really fascinating. And now I have a small network of fellow artists that we can ping a message to and say, are you going up for this? What do you think about it? Or this is bullshit, we should write a letter, right? Let's construct something, or let's go to the theatre together, let's grab a pint. And I feel like the next generation of artists are doing that. I just wish I'd done it sooner. And actually it has become so empowering, and it's not just about making good work, but I've noticed that such great relationships, friendships, and different aspects of work come out of those conversations. And that's been really empowering for me.
That's incredible. Are you finding that kind of thing as well, Sathnam?
You know what? Writing is much more isolated, like writing books. Screenplays are much more collegiate. It's one of the hardest things about writing books is that it's just you. It's also one of the best things because you're in charge. No one's going to fuck around with what you do. It's just you. It's just the voices in your head are going to undermine you quite a lot sometimes. And also I think if you've been writing books for long enough, it actually means you can't work with other people. You go feral. You know, I'm so used to getting my own way, and I would like to do a screenplay experience, but I've never done it. But I'm quite good at also letting go. So
work together. Do you know what? I'm going to flash this comment on the screen as well. By the way, guys, if you have questions, and just fly them in, and we'll try and make time for them. I just thought this was great while you were talking, Sacha. Got a script on my desk. We should talk. Brilliant, love it.
No, my novel is being turned into a play, so that's been quite an interesting experience. Yeah, for the Birmingham Rep later this year.
Wait, which one? Marriage Material or Top?
Yeah, Marriage Material.
Marriage Material.
And it's once again, I found it quite easy to let go. I've let them do whatever they want. I quite envy them because I always thought I wrote a book about Brexit before Brexit happened, so they've been able to change it and set it in Brexit. So I envy them in a way.
These are like very hard-hitting issues in each of these 3 books, like very different styles, but very complex themes that get to the root of societal and historical issues. Is that something you do deliberately in your work, or did that just happen?
I think, thank you for picking that up. But yes, I think I've realized that's what attracts me. I think you've got to be, as a writer and probably as an actor too, you've got to be interested. If you're not interested, forget it. You cannot write for the market. You can't think, oh, that will be a bestseller, I better write about that. You've got to be interested. And for me, I need to be intimidated. I like that feeling at the beginning of a project that I can't do it. So, with a memoir, when I was 29, I was like, there's no way I can write a memoir. This is ludicrous, And I felt the same about a novel. It's way beyond me. And I definitely felt it about a book on empire. I've already got a GCSE in history, and it was my worst subject. I was bottom of the class when I was 14 in history. So, but I like that feeling of going from complete anxiety and intimidation to actually doing it.
Yeah, there's a real sense of achievement once you've done it. I have the same thing. If I have a project, I think if there's a bit of fear there, I should be doing it. It means I'm challenging myself, and it's amazing getting through it the other side, and you look back and you go, God, how the hell did I do that?
Yeah, the journey is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't buy that. I mean, that feeling of conquered something. And I think people like Boris Johnson, who are born into privilege and he always thought he's going to be prime minister, how boring must their life be? Because they just end up doing what they thought they were going to do anyway. But when you do things that you never imagined you could do, that's cool. That's being alive, isn't it?
Of course, it's amazing. So I'm sick. I have a chronic illness that affects every area of my life, and so I've had to figure out a way to do what I want to do and love from bed, mostly in pajamas, and still do things like change policy and do crisis relief work and the stuff I do outside of lit and all of this stuff, and then work in literature and everything. My family are always like, why are you tired? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in my pajamas a lot and I can do this from bed. But I love the idea of, God, years ago, I went to a talk and somebody said, there's no such thing as a career ladder, it's a climbing frame. And it just changed my whole life. And I was like, oh my God, it is. And there's I think we were always on this, and perhaps this is a sort of a minority thing as well, that we were always taught there's this one track to get everywhere. And there is a one set path. And if you deviate from that, then danger lies that way. And so being able to sort of figure out your own path and piece together different bits that still enable you to feel satisfied when you're incredibly type A, and to be able to engage with things that you feel shift the needle a little. That's where I get excited. That's where I feel like the meat, the marrow and bones of life is. And And I love that we're now able to do that. In the 80s, I never would have thought that I would be doing this. Never, ever, ever. And I never would have thought I'd be brave enough to just go, hi, can you do this? Will you do this with me? Great, let's do it. Should we do it? Oh, you're doing it now. And that sort of moxie and gumption is something that is a really beautiful thing, I think, that we're all developing now. And it's a lovely thing because we'd never had it. We never had it.
Yeah.
Sasha's spoken about, managing creativity around illness. I think that's really inspiring because, like, it's a thing we don't talk about, isn't it?
Oh yeah, we don't talk about being sick in our community necessarily, but
I have Crohn's disease, and it's taken me years again to really embrace that as a part of me, as opposed to pushing it away. And a lot of people don't really talk about with Crohn's is they focus on, Crohn's disease happens in the gut, and it's an overactive immune system. It can make the bowel in a way attack itself, but everyone focuses so much on the gut that they neglect the connection to the brain. We were talking about not talking. There's two aspects in terms of not speaking about mental health in the South Asian community, but men particularly, and just not great about talking. I mean, I never spoke about anything in school. So learning to embrace the Crohn's has also opened up the connection with the brain as well. And talking, I'm quite open about my mental health as well, in terms of, having anxiety and how that anxiety can exacerbate the Crohn's disease. I'm quite open about talking about having therapy, and I'm a real advocate for that. And actually, by talking about it and being confident in talking about it, it really helps you. You really start to discover who you are, and it's really empowering. And I just wonder why I didn't do it sooner. And that's because we're caught in a kind of stigma about it, and therefore we don't talk about it. And when we think we're happy, we're actually maybe suppressing a lot of stuff as well.
We're raised in a culture that's a disconnect of self. I genuinely believe that. And I think more so within South Asian culture on top of that. And so, when you lose agency of your body, as autoimmune goblin also, but like, it's such a hard thing to reconcile, and that it is a straight line to your brain, isn't it? And people will look at the anatomical and the issue where the disease is, and there isn't sort of the support for the emotional side of what you do and what happens to you, and then you're almost left to deal with that by yourself. And it's such an interesting thing where, because of our culture as well, we don't talk about it. And actually, one of my questions from before was about, as Asian men, do you think that we face this in our community more so? With the men from our community, this idea of not actually talking about the difficult things that we face physically, emotionally, mentally. And do you feel that that's changing?
Yeah, I mean, Punjabi men are really macho. I mean, it's like extremely macho. And it was a culture I always struggled with. I mean, because I guess I was always quite a sensitive child, and I had my 54 cousins, and a lot of them are men, and they were quite macho. And fortunately, I was the youngest boy out of the 54, or the second youngest. And so they left me alone. So I could just go and read books, and they didn't really care. But I found that very intimidating. Just going back to the gut, I'm going to say something very briefly. But weirdly, no one understands why schizophrenia develops. But one of the big schools of thought now is that it might be related to the gut. But actually, severe mental illness could have something to do with the microbiome and like your bacteria in your gut. And so I find that stuff really fascinating. But I think the two are definitely connected.
Yeah,
100%. There's a whole area of medicine that actually isn't massively explored. It's called functional medicine, and it's all about everything being centered in and rooted in the gut. And what they do is immediately it starts with dietary change, and it's from there upwards, and it's for chronic illnesses and diseases, but we just don't explore it as the first avenue. And I was told about it from a friend of mine that's a doctor, and was like, has anybody said this to you before? I was like, never heard about it my entire life. No one has said it. It's interesting.
We should have all been doctors, man.
It does surprise me, because I I got diagnosed in 2006, but only in the last couple of years. Actually, to be fair, I don't, and everyone has their own experience, but I have an amazing IBD team, but not once have I had a specialist. There you go. A specialist has encouraged me to have maybe consider having therapy or anything that kind of to untangle some of the stuff going on in the brain, because I think I sat on it for so long. My anxiety started to manifest in crazy ways. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and went, I really need to start thinking about my Indian identity. I'd worked so much, and suddenly a lot of people were going, hey, you're doing so well, it's great, isn't it? And I'd be like, yeah. And then I found myself literally locking myself in my trailer and not eating lunch because the anxiety was so intense, and I didn't know what was going on. I was like, oh my God, I only know being an actor, and if I can't get rid of this anxiety, how am I gonna perform? And it was like a cycle. It would just, I was constantly feeding it, and then they're like, right, you're on, Sash, and you put on this front like, oh, everything's great, but slowly it got to a point where I was like, I need to stop and figure this out, because not only is my gut on fire, but I'm feeling really sad, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
But actually, I think Topknot was a real catalyst for that, and it's still evolving. But it's honestly more than doing acting jobs, but being able to talk and connecting and communicating with my fellow artists who come from similar backgrounds. I never come away from a conversation thinking, oh my God, that was real, so tiring. I always come away feeling empowered by not being afraid to ask questions like, what's your story? How did that happen? It's so nourishing, and it feeds in everything I do.
I love it, and it's something that I always thought that I could never that I've never found Asian people that I could fit in with, and I always thought I was an alien for most of my life. I was like, I'm too white for Asian kids that I've grown up with, and because I talk the way I do, and I don't know how to change that, and I don't I can't do anything about it, and I just didn't have a lot of Asian friends growing up, and then I started doing this South Asian Writers hashtag, went everywhere, and then I started doing South Asian Heritage Month, and all of the people that would speak to you on the phone that were in the lit space and the art space and in the culture space, and they were doing all of these amazing, incredible things, and we'd meet each other and we'd go, oh my God, and it was like that Spider-Man meme, when everyone's just and they're pointing at each other going, oh my God, oh, but you're me, and it was just like the sense of kinship that I found and have been just like basking in for the last 3 years has been so qualifying and so nourishing in a way that I don't have language for. I didn't realize that this was a wound. I didn't realize, and I didn't realize that I needed it at all. And it's just been so lovely. It's so lovely, and I feel like so many of us have that disconnect. And I loved hearing you say that. And it's something that you found with fellow artists as well, because then that informs your creative practice.
Yeah, it totally does. Initially, I was like, oh, it's about connecting so we can make our own work, but it became more than that. And that was a real, just a really interesting thing to experience and to have now. Like I've got, and it's still expanding to just connect and to meet up. And I'm not the only one that's doing it. I know other people are doing it as well. And it's great. It's about time that we do that. We've really got to. We can't rely on the industry to create those opportunities. But there's also, like I said earlier, there's room to re-educate as opposed to kind of operating from an angry place, because then you just kind of get, because I don't want to just be in a position where you've got British South Asians making their work and then you've got mainstream work happening. We need to start working together in order to make a brilliant sci-fi film that happens to have
oh my God, I want to see it
directed or written or leading South Asians in it. That isn't about just about culture.
It isn't a token version of like, here is the brown person doing the brown things and saying, walking a brown walk and eating, and that's the thing. It's where their brownness is incidental to their function in the story, and that's when we know that we've got it. Like, that's when we know that it's right. And I, there's always space for, if you want to educate somebody on your lived experience, brilliant, but that's not always our job. And I think
Yeah.
the understanding of that, how that dichotomy works, is really what we're trying to kind of finesse at the moment.
And we're complex as well. Like I get
Yeah.
tired sometimes of playing, you know, the South Asian character that's so earnest and wears his heart on his sleeve. And like I want to play a character that can be a bit of a dick.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crucial, you know.
Oh, I have a question. How do you both feel about, and you may not agree, but almost the desexualization of Asian men in film throughout the last decade, if not longer? How does that sit with you?
Oh, you said, I think Sasha's very sexy. And
I as an individual, of course, I mean, as in the industry, it's something that with East Asian and South Asian men, and it's changing a bit now, but
there's a general issue with society, isn't there? I mean, maybe it's a reflection of that. I've read all this research about dating and how different races do well and don't do well in the West, you know, because now you can follow the stats, right? Stuff like OkCupid. So you have, you know, Asian women being very fetishized and then Black women being ignored. Similarly, you have Black men being fetishized and Asian men being ignored. And it's a reversal. I don't know how much of it is just the way we are or how much of it is, you know, racist.
I think it's societal conditioning and partly racism as well.
Yeah.
I think from an Asian woman's perspective, that like I'm 5'2", so I'm short as well, and like all the apps are deleted. Like I just find them very stressful. But when I moved here and I was on them for like 5 minutes, it was terrifying. My inbox was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And it is a giant, tall white men that want to colonize your vagina. I can't say that, but it is. I'm so sorry, but it is this fetishization of like I've been taught that you are implicitly docile and that you will bend to my will. And then the chat is just, I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I was like, oh, I don't think you know me. I will destroy you. I'm going to leave. Bye. And it was really, really bizarre. And I've met people throughout my life that I've dated who weren't BIPOC, and they're always so surprised by different parts of my personality. And they're like, oh my God, you're so confident. Or, oh, you play guitar. That's so weird. And I'm like, why is that weird? That just tells me you're sheltered. Anybody can play an instrument. This is really bizarre to me, and it's this. I think we've been brought up viewing each other through these very problematic lenses that then actually inform our behaviors. And that's incredibly worrying. And then relationship dynamics as well. So I find it very interesting, and I love playing with these people and toying with them when I meet them. I find it hilarious.
But you're right, because you end up then playing a version of yourself that you end up being kind of what the industry expects you to be, in a way. And that's what I'm trying to challenge and have the confidence to be like, no, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't say that. And actually, I'm sexy, I'm confident. Yeah. And so is my fellow artists as well. But it's reconditioning some of that behavior. I totally agree. And the amount of times I see, it's occasionally you see the odd role where a British Asian guy is the lead kind of attractive guy, the cool dude. But it's so rare. It is really rare.
The only one I think of when you say that is the Buddha Suburbia, which was such a long time ago.
But we've got Danny Boyle's Yesterday. That was,
Oh yeah.
Himesh
Patel. I don't understand why
Patel and all
suddenly
of his...
a lot better after that, and it kind of went backwards.
I think we're moving towards it now. I think one of the things that is encouraging is like, for me anyway, as a viewer, and what I'm finding is when the people making the decisions and when the people, it's not just the actor that needs to represent whatever demographic that you want the person to be. When the people in the room aren't from that community, you're never going to get an authentic experience on screen. Never, ever, ever, because there will always be a misfire. Always. And so now I feel as though actually people in industry that are writing, that are producing, that are directing are of those communities. And so what we're seeing is a more faithful and authentic representation of self. And therefore they do right by the character. And so we are seeing like sexy Asian men on screen because Asian men are sexy, and that's been a fact since the beginning of time, and the fact that reality has been distorted so much is so problematic.
But that things are changing as well, in a sense, and I know not every actor is in the fortunate position to do this, but I can sometimes stipulate stuff, and I'm finding the confidence to do that. And I don't do it with all my projects because, like I said, sometimes I'm like, the character doesn't need to be culturally specific. I don't want to. It's not important to the story. It doesn't move the story forward. But sometimes I'm like, actually, this will actually enhance the character. So, but what I will do sometimes is say I'm not committing to the job until I work with the writer to share my experience to make it culturally specific. And so I've learned not to be kind of, oh, they just don't get it, and so screw them. It's actually putting those things in place, sometimes contractually. So you then can have those, and it's not always contractually, but I try and board a project earlier so I can have that conversation with the writer. So it's not just done last minute in the room, just as a general, we'll just change this. We'll really kind of try and work on it and flesh it out a little bit. And actually, it's about, sometimes I've realized it's about, when it comes about the cultural specificity, it's actually about taking it back a little bit, or even sometimes not being afraid to push it further. And that's been really empowering, because years ago I just don't think I'd have the confidence. I'd just be so grateful that I've been given a job. I wouldn't
just
question
happy to
it.
be nominated.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in an audition once, and the director said to me, and this is no joke, he said, can you just do the dialogue in Arabic, please? And
just
no joke,
I know you are Arabic and speak it. Love that.
No joke. Rather than questioning him because he's some big American director, I did the scene in Arabic. I completely made it up.
No, that's brilliant. I love it.
What was sad, he did not know the difference. He was like, oh, that was quite a good read, totally. I mean, but we can't negate that things are changing, and things are always constantly going to be evolving. I don't think I'm going to hit a place and I go, oh, yes, I've got it. It's just being open and to change, and not being afraid to have the conversation.
Yeah. Sathnam, do you think you'd ever write for screen?
Do you think you'd ever go into film writing? Like I said, I'm become a bit too feral, but also
work together.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. No one, people haven't asked me. I think I maybe have a reputation for being unclubbable. But no, I'd like to. If you're a writer, you basically, it's like being a sports person. You want to try most things out to see. You might have a talent when you don't realize it. Might be terrible. I do find dialogue the hardest thing in books, so maybe that's not a good sign.
Well, with the script, it's just pure dialogue, so that's your content, and you'll have to lean into it. So
yeah, maybe.
And it was pretty funny as well, Sathnam.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Everything also takes ages. This is the other thing that I was talking to Mirasal the other day, and we're like, what there really needs to be is a really big box set or Netflix series about mafia in Bollywood. I mean,
love it.
And we were both like, that's such a great idea. And they were like, why don't you write it? She's like, why don't you write it? It's because we know why we're not going to write it, because it'll take 10 years of your life, not only to write it, but then to pitch it, to get it, if you get it made. So, and when you're older, like we are, you haven't got 10 years to do it. So it can be quite difficult.
It's interesting, isn't it, that I noticed working with people, there was a lot of, and I had it myself, there was a lot of fear. It felt like sometimes a lot of the decisions we made were, we were worried about what the rest of the community were going to think. Do you know what I mean? It was, and it took me a while to kind of understand that, because I remember we were trying to put out a tweet about something just to kind of collate more voices, but it took us a long time, and eventually we didn't do it because we were like, actually, is this going to cause some damage? And actually, we need to learn to pull the trigger. Even if it doesn't work, it's still going to create something. You can't. It's almost like that ingrained pressure that we've got to succeed. you know?
Hmm.
Do you know, we were talking about it, like, you can't just be good, you've got to be exceptional if you're going to make it. But actually, you've got to fail, because
That's part of success.
you can't be afraid of failure. I think that's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
yeah. I think success is made of many failures, and then and that teaches you how to do better. And
but you also
better,
need to
and
eat.
it's honing. Yes, true. Yeah, very, very, very true. You do also need to eat. This is true.
Yeah.
Do we look? We're going over an hour now, aren't we? There are loads of websites on Bollywood Mafia. What?
Yeah, I saw that message. So what they're saying, there's actually a Bollywood Mafia series.
All right.
I'm gonna look
Guys,
that up.
if you have any questions, put them in the chat now, because we're going to have to close soon.
Mirzapur being one. I'm gonna look that up. Thank you, White Rock Entertainment, whoever you are. If you want to send us a title, I would love to watch that. Yeah, there are some really good Netflix Indian series now on there. So things are improving. There's so much colorblind casting now. Dev Patel's career is great. You know, there are some
I love
people
this.
doing really well and doing amazing stuff.
So I think lots of hope for the future. What's happening? How did I do that? Go away. There we go. So many
Bridgerton.
technical things. Bridget, somebody's just said Bridgerton. Love that.
Oh,
We do love
Mazarpur.
Bridgerton.
Is that what it is? I've not heard of that. I'm going to look it up.
What's
Mazarpur.
Mazarpur?
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Apparently, an Indian Mafia series. I should look it up. Thank you for that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I expect you to write this now. Please do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing as well about if it takes 10 years to do, go away, spam. If it takes 10 years to do, then, you know, the things that like Sacha is doing in terms of like having a collective and a coalition, you know, working together and having, you know, creatives working on a project together, and then this idea that forms, 10 years is nothing really. If it's a collective endeavor, perhaps my suggestion. Oh, we've got another. Oh, Catherine, how lovely.
I realize I've alienated myself with the audience by saying I've never seen a single episode of Doctor Who.
This is shameful.
I have seen Sacha and other stuff.
How do we remedy this?
I don't know where to start. It's too late now, isn't it? I've got to start in 1964 or something.
No, that's well, I guess you could. You could start right at the beginning.
We've got something special airing some point. Maybe you can watch that if you want.
Watch the Christmas episodes, perhaps. Maybe Sacha can just tell you which ones he's in, and you can watch all of those. Somebody's saying watch Spyfall with no context. Sathnam, please come to Bath and do a reading at one of our bookshops. And please be in the next.
Oh God, Sacha, you would be great in Bridgerton. You would be good in that. You've done a bit of costume drama, haven't you?
My actual best friend is in it, Jonathan Bailey, and he's an amazing actor, and I'm so proud of him. It's completely transformed his life doing Bridgerton.
It's so massive, isn't it? I mean,
it's huge.
People who are in it can't really leave the house.
You see, you've got to love Shondaland, though, haven't you? She's amazing. Shonda. Right, okay. Keep going. Really enjoying this. No, we have lives. We have to leave. I'm so sorry. But yes, this has been really fun. This is really lovely. Thank you so much. And we have to close. Thank you so much for your time, guys. This has been an absolute pleasure. It really, really has.
Thank you.
Right. Good evening, everybody, and happy South Asian Heritage Month. And we'll see you soon. We have some more content actually coming up in August with Sathnam. It's a video episode of the Decolonial Podcast where he'll be talking about Empireland. And it was an episode that was live on Spotify earlier this year, but we'll be releasing the video edit next month. So tune in for that. And that's all from us, really. So have a nice weekend and stay safe. Bye.
Nice chatting, everyone. Take care.
Bye.